Hey, everybody. Welcome to the April Dinner with the Devs. We have a lovely representation of our production team, our producers. And yeah, we're going to get started. So thank you so much for joining us on the Schell Games YouTube channel. If you haven't already, make sure that either before or after the stream that you subscribe and enable your notifications so you can see all the lovely videos that we put out. Now, just for some housekeeping, if you have a question, please put it in the live chat of the stream. If you are following the video in Discord, whether you're a part of the I Expect You Die Discord or the Until You Fall Discord, I believe we have some moderators there that are fielding questions in the Dinner with the Devs channel. So make sure you put those questions in there as well. So our live chat moderator, Jill, our Senior Director of Marketing, hi, Jill, thank you for your help, will put that into the feed for us to talk about. So we are going to talk about game production, how the game gets made, the scheduling with the teams, and how our producers can really work with the team dynamics of the small team, large team, small project, large projects, and their wins, challenges, and everything in between along the way. So please, if you have any questions about what exactly does it mean to be a producer, what's the difference between a producer and a project director, or what are some I think Daniel, we're going to tackle your question, Daniel. What type of proud of this work moments have these producers had? So we're also going to answer what is something that you continue to learn as you are producing a game. So we'll make sure that our producers are able to answer that. And then whenever we get to the end of the stream, we have a couple announcements, a new bundle that we released just today as part of Superhero Day, was April 28th, one of my favorite holidays, and a chance for you to meet our devs. We'll talk a little bit more about the Schell Games open house. So with that, let's meet let's meet all of our panel. So we'll start with Danny, then Connor, then Laura. So go ahead, Danny.
Cool. Yeah, hi, I'm Danny. I'm a game producer here at Schell Games.
All right, and then I'm Connor Triplett. I'm also a game producer here at Schell.
I'm Laura Norbeck. I'm an advanced producer here at Schell.
Cool. So, guys, what does game production or producing a game, what exactly does that mean? Because some people may have an idea of hearing, it's like, oh, you're a producer, and they're thinking maybe more along the lines of some other, creative professions. But what does that mean to you? And now let's start with Connor.
All right. Yeah, I think that's probably the first question I get asked whenever I say that I'm a producer, and it's a pretty nebulous answer because I think we'll kind of touch on this throughout, that it changes project to project, company to company, game to game, all that kind of stuff. But I think the easiest way to start is that it's kind of the game development equivalent of a project manager. That's kind of the baseline of schedule, resources, working with people on the team, budget, schedule, all that kind of stuff. And then filling in the cracks of like the nuance of game development, of like very specific game development cycles and develop in agile, scrum, all that kind of stuff. But it really all starts with you are the champion of schedule, resources, budget, time, all that kind of stuff. So you start there and then fill in the cracks where the rest of the team needs you.
Cool. And then Danny, Laura, throughout this thing, all of you guys, if you have something to add on to the answer, just feel free.
Sure. So for me, production is basically you're the counterpart to the director. So the director oftentimes is the person carrying out the vision. They're the person who is basically responsible for the what are we making, and as the producer, you are responsible for the how are we making it. So just to use like a train analogy, maybe they're the ones deciding where the train goes on the tracks and what junctions it's going to go through, and you're making sure that the engine is filled with coal, you're making sure that, you know, all the wheels are working properly. And so, yeah, you're just making sure that the project can come in on time, on budget, and that the team is happy. That's incredibly important, because oftentimes if you want a project to come in on time and on budget, if the team's not happy, you might not get to that point, and you might not produce something that is quite as quality as it would be otherwise.
Good deal. So, Laura, you kind of you mentioned this, and that was a kind of our next point, because in the studio we kind of separated, producer and a project director, and so you kind of mentioned, but if you just want to, hit that point home, just for everybody to understand the difference between, what exactly the producer is, what exactly the project director, is in charge of, and how that works.
Yeah, absolutely. So to Connor's point, it does tend to look different from project to project, but at a high level, the project producer and the project director, they're counterparts in leading the team. So generally at Schell, in our production, we have various disciplines on the team. So we've got designers who are, they're the vision holders. They're helping to create exactly what it's going to look like. There's art that makes it beautiful, and then there's engineering that makes it run. So the project producer and the project director are taking all of those elements and piecing together the project as a whole. So one thing that can happen is when all of those disciplines, very talented individuals in each discipline, can end up doing some heads down work and really making sure that their piece of the pie is coming together really nicely. One of the challenges with that is that an engineer might not be thinking about what an artist is creating, and the artist might not be thinking about what the designer perfectly had in mind for the level. So as project leadership, you have to make sure that it makes sense, that the development pipeline is happening in such a way that the team can work cohesively, that all of the work is being optimized, that things aren't out of sync and disjointed in terms of how things come onto a project. And that requires a lot of planning, and it requires a little bit of understanding of every little piece of the puzzle. So it's I found that one of the most important parts of this job is to have humility and to go to people and say, you are an expert in what you're doing, and I need to understand more of that to understand, is this going to come online at the time that we need it to? Is it going to take longer than we thought? Do you have enough tasks to fill your day? So it's really just kind of monitoring every piece of the project and planning. Like Connor said, it's very much a project management position too. So you want to make sure that everything is exactly where it's supposed to be. Nothing's going too far ahead or getting too far behind. And that might sound a little bit, simplistic, but because we do so many different really cool projects at Schell, there are an infinite number of variables that can come up, that foreseen and unforeseen. As we sit in a pandemic doing all this remote work, all kinds of stuff can crop up. So how do we make sure that our work is still of the utmost quality, and how do we make sure that it's happening in such a way that it's still getting done on time, and again, the team is happy? Those pillars can definitely keep a team on track.
Good stuff. Yeah, I'm always impressed of the production team and how the teams can ramp up so quickly, iterate so quickly, and really just put out some really quality stuff. But I kind of want to take a step back, and I'll start with you, Danny, about how exactly did you get into game production? Because people always talk about, well, I want to design, or I want to make the game look pretty, like I want to be an artist, or I want to be in the nuts and bolts of the code. So how do you get into the track of, I want to make sure this game is actually a game? Like how do I make sure that this game gets shipped? So Danny, can you start us off of how you got into that track?
Yeah, so I didn't really set out to be a producer. I think I did know I wanted to work in games. I started out as a community manager. Just through various roles and various companies, I wound up doing more kind of like live operations. So I was doing more like kind of implementing things on the back end to make sure that our live events went live in a mobile game that I was working on. As a side effect of that, as I was very involved in, well, what kind of content do we need to produce? Like, do people have time to produce it? Like, what kind of time frames are we working in? And I just kind of very naturally fell into this kind of producer role there. It was very different to my role here in the sense that it was very confined to very short sprints. We were basically just running on 1 week sprints that just went over and over. So it was very easy to scope it out, right? Like, it was a very small chunk. But yeah, going from there, I started to realize how interesting it was, just how much goes on. I guess this is kind of like what Laura was talking about in the last segment, is that when you're working on a project and you're in art or you're in engineering, you can get really lost in the weeds, right? Like tunnel vision on the thing that you're working on. And that's when you're the most productive. And you almost need this other person there who can take care of all these bigger picture things and make sure that, yeah, like this is when the cutoff for this is. Like, are you staying on track? Like, who's actually managing the JIRA? Who's actually making sure that we're delivering things on time and does it fit within the budget and scope? And it just takes all of that kind of weight off people's shoulders, right? When they can just do their best work and not have to worry and know there's someone else to take care of that. So I guess that's kind of how I fell into production. I was kind of just starting to do that naturally in my last role. And then I was really excited about VR. So I interviewed with Schell Games and I wound up being a producer here. And yeah.
Good deal. How about you, Connor? How did you fall into the game production track?
Yeah, I think falling into it is, I think a lot of people probably say that that's what happened. I'm no different. I was kind of technical background, engineering undergrad, and then went over to the ETC where Jesse Schell teaches and kind of got to know a little bit more about Schell Games as a whole and just kind of game design, game development in general. And I kind of fall into that. Laura was mentioning it earlier, the like knowing a little bit of everything that's going on, like knowing a little bit of art, knowing a little bit of engineering. And it's like, you don't want me to be the person writing the code, but I don't mind being the person in the art meeting who like stands up for the code and like is the one who knows, like trying to know a little bit more about other people's disciplines when you go to a meeting that they may not be at. So I think having that bigger picture view that Danny touched on too, like that's kind of always been my forte, is trying to see bigger picture and how things fit together and kind of come together, as opposed to, hey, here's my thing, it's done, now somebody else go put the pieces together. So, and I think once, when I was trying to figure out where I fit into the industry, especially when the pandemic hit and I was kind of scrounging around trying to figure out what was next, I was in theme parks before I came here, and we had producers, we had similar things going on. And I realized that a lot of the stuff that I did within the art department when I was in the theme park industry, it was, a lot of this is kind of producery related. It's bringing stuff together to put it in the right spot, to tell the right story. And when I came, talked to Schell and talked to other places, I realized like, oh, that's really where my skill sets fit. So big picture, put it all together. It was kind of how I ended up here.
Good stuff. And last but not least, Laura, how did you make your way into game production?
Sure. I like to joke I took the scenic route. So my undergrad was in media arts. I worked in broadcasting for a few years, and I worked at a location-based experience for which Schell ended up creating an experience. So I project managed that from the client perspective. And so that's how I first came to know about Schell, and the team was amazing, the work was amazing. And I had done some, in my past roles, some project manager work. So just, keeping tabs on a project, making sure that everything is going well. And many of those positions had creative elements to them as well. So I worked, as I mentioned, in video. So you start learning about frames per second, you start learning about frame rates, you start learning about more linear production than game design certainly is, but sticking a toe into that world has been really great. And then I continued on to get a master's degree. I did some MBA studies in technology management, and ultimately got a master's in organizational leadership. I knew that I wanted to do something in terms of leading teams. So I have a little bit of a media background, I have a little bit of a project management background, and a team leadership background. And that all culminated for the opportunity to be with Schell Games.
Good stuff. Laura, you have been like a great segue leader for me, because Night Eye Killer asks, is a game producer and a project manager the same thing? And so I think you all kind of touched on it, especially you, Laura. So, is a project manager the same thing as a game producer?
Well, I think it depends on where the producer or project manager is, and I think it depends on who you ask. So I think that role can be much like any role in a variety of industries. There are a lot of similarities between a project manager and a game producer. I think one thing for me that sets them apart dramatically is the creative element. So one thing that we get to do at Schell, it's a perfectly sized company in which everyone on the team can have some creative input. I think sometimes you get into maybe, and this is just my experience, larger organizations, sometimes you get into more of a tunneled role. So for example, if you're a project manager, you're just creating Gantt charts, you're just creating a lot of like the business end of what we do in production at Schell. But one of the nice things is we can be a part of a brainstorm in addition to leading a brainstorm on a team. It's more than check-ins. There's a lot of creativity involved as well. To jump back to your last question of how project leadership between the project director and the project producer work together. Sometimes, depending on the director and the producer, sometimes you do have some creative input. Now, ultimately, the director is the vision holder, but you can have those conversations. So sometimes they'll have these beautiful ideas and you're like, that is way out of scope. There's no way that's going to fit. And so you can kind of have that push and pull, a very friendly tug of war, that you can discuss an idea and you can make sure that as you work towards a perfect solution that will both fit within the project and be best for the project, you can bounce creative ideas back and forth. So for me, being a producer is, it has some creativity to it, but it also has, it has the soft part, that, the fun creative stuff, and it also has the super responsible part that allows everyone else on the team to exercise their creativity to the fullest extent, because they know you're there kind of gatekeeping, making sure things don't get too crazy. And it lets everybody else really make the most of the projects.
Good stuff. So you touched on something about positions being siloed, and maybe it could just be different companies, and I think there are different ways of how organizations, especially in the game industry, may associate project managers, directors, producers, and things like that. But what have you seen as some misconceptions of being a game producer? And let's start with Danny with this one.
Oh, this is tricky. Yeah, because I feel like this has been really covered really well by Laura. Like, to echo a lot of her sentiments, it is normally, like people think like, oh, if you're the producer, you're kind of like this creative overlord of the project, and that you have all this say in like what goes in it and what everything's called and what everything does. And the reality is that, as well, at least the way we work internally, is that mostly falls on the project director. And then just the team at large, and you're kind of more like the person who helps facilitate those discussions and facilitate those decisions when a decision can't be reached. But it's less so that it's more like high level stuff that you wind up dealing with day to day, and less of the kind of like creative in the weeds stuff. Because I guess the risk is, it's kind of like what I was talking about earlier, is like if you do get too in the weeds with stuff, then who is watching, like the high level of things, who is watching the project schedule, who's watching the budget. So
I would say on the other side of that coin, there's the other misconception that you are just the bad guy who, whenever stuff gets crazy and out of scope, you're the one who's always like, nope, can't do it. Not enough time, not enough money. But and that's kind of that's the worst thing. Like the worst thing in our job is saying, hey, we actually cannot do that thing. Because like we want this thing, the thing that you're making, the game, the experience, whatever, to be as cool as possible. Like we are on the same page as the team, that we want it to be as beautiful, as robust, as any fill in the blank adjective as possible, but we can't always hit all those marks. So it's the trying to prioritize and like trying to work with the team to figure out what the priorities are. That it's like, hey, we know we can't do 30 levels, but we could do 15 that are slightly more detailed, and like try and find the push and pull of like what makes the team still feel good about something, even though it's not exactly the thing that they had in mind, using our constraints and the levers that we have, like schedule and budget and all that kind of stuff, to say like, hey, just because your perfect idea doesn't work, we can find a lot of that in this other idea that does fit.
Good stuff. Yeah. Yeah. And there's a lot of studies out there that really talk about creative tension in teams. And, I mean, I don't have to tell you guys that. You guys study that all the time. But, well, I guess, yeah. I did my own great segue. So speaking of studied, so what course or, study subjects, that helped you, really get into, well, I guess not just the games industry, because there are a couple people watching that are just interested in getting into the game industry in general, but also specifically, getting into, game, production or being a producer. Laura, you kind of touched on this on, organizational leadership and organizing teams. So let's start. I guess, Connor, you're the last one talking, so I'll start with you about, kind of your course. So you kind of touched on it on your different aspects, but how did, your learnings or experiences prepared you to your current role?
Yeah. So I think I didn't really know much about project management or production as like an undergrad student. And I kind of like I interned at a car company between my junior and senior year. And I kind of got shuffled into the project management like silo. That's kind of when I realized, oh, I'm not really a mechanical engineer that wants to build a car. Like I actually do fit more in this, like, how do we make the process more efficient? A little bit more of the biz dev, like analysis kind of side. And going back to school, I did a little bit more in the business and engineering, how companies work together, things like that. And then I also took a handful of psychology classes throughout undergrad, and kind of adding that to more design classes that were more project focused and working with people from other majors and other departments. I started to kind of figure out like any experience that I had as a team, like being a part of a team with people who are interdisciplinary and do different things than me, that has really paid dividends like over the years. So in the last 4 or 5 years, any different experience that I've had with people that do different things than me has made me better at this job. I also, if anybody from my team is watching right now, I make too many sports metaphors throughout the day. And I take a lot of what I've learned as like an athlete when I was younger, like being on a basketball team, being on a baseball team, that everybody has their role that they have to play, and how can you get people in the right spots and doing the right stuff for them to make plays and be successful. And so I think taking any of that out, it doesn't even have to be academic context. Like anytime you can work with other people, that has kind of been that's been the best experience to be in this role.
Good deal. How about you, Danny?
Yeah, so I guess my undergrad was in visual art. I guess weirdly that did still come in handy. It's really good for just having like a general understanding of creative applications and how creative people work and how to interface with people. Just, I don't know, having that kind of more like whimsical side of life. When I went back for postgrad, I did a Master of Entrepreneurship, which was actually vastly helpful because at the time I was very interested in startups. Especially in the gaming space, and you get exposed to all the whole idea of venture capital and how does funding work, and like what are exit strategies, like what's risk that you assume. And so I got way more of the kind of like management skills, I guess, through that qualification. It also led to my first job in gaming. It turned out so the founder of the first gaming company I worked for also did that degree. So yeah, it turned out to be a really good gateway, just getting that kind of business sense, I guess. Yeah.
Cool. What about you, Laura?
Sure. I don't know that I could point to one training or one thing that I've done in particular that truly prepared me for this role. I do think that it came down to quite a few different things. I think, and if to really oversimplify, it comes down to soft skills and hard skills. So when I say that, soft skills are more the people skills, learning how to have difficult conversations. What does confrontation without conflict look like when you have to have a difficult conversation with somebody? How can you spot, if somebody is just a little bit off, how can you get to the root of the matter? How can you build trust on a team? How can you, any number of things that are really a lot harder to quantify. So building those over the years and just working with different people and learning to both listen and discuss and sit back and watch how do I work with a wide variety of people with different skill sets and talents? And then also the hard skills. So just project management, like we've touched on a little bit before. I think my master's degree did a great job with bringing all of that together, but I also don't know that I could do what I do now without some of the more formal training that I received in my undergrad in media arts, and really understanding some of the nuts and bolts of each of these disciplines a little bit more deeply. And then also one thing that I think is oftentimes, like at least in some of the business classes that I attended, they work so hard in talking about, you have to project confidence, you have to, this is one way to lead. There's so many different ways to lead, and learning about different leadership styles has been really important. So learning about servant leadership is a theory that I really subscribe to. So having authentic leadership, going to people and just not trying to be too professional or too, it comes off as standoffish. So, and you can learn that anywhere. You can learn that in your yoga studio, talking to your neighbors, anything like that. I've learned from I have 2 kids. I've learned an incredible amount of humility just from being a parent too. So I think you can get that kind of education from a wide variety of places in life. But yeah, I think it's just paying attention to whatever you're studying, wherever you're working. And if it's a goal that you want to work towards being a producer or leading a team or that kind of management, just figuring out what works the best with other people and where your comfort zone lies and what type of management style that you want to exude.
Good stuff. Well, thank you all for sharing your experiences. Let's see. So let's get to some questions here. Let's see. Oh, there's some good ones. Let's see. I'll save one of your questions, Night Eye Killer, for later on in the stream. But don't worry, I'm gonna get to it. Let's see. So Miss Maxima VR, avid Discord user in Until You Fall. So thank you, Miss Maxima, for watching. She asks, are game producers decision makers? And I think you guys kind of touched on this, so we can, Connor, if you want to just give a little bit more a definite answer to Miss Maxima on that.
I wish I could give a definite yes or no answer, but I think most of our answers end up being it depends. I think we try to, I think Laura touched on it the most at the beginning with the project director and producer, that they're the last 2 stops on any decision, that it's like, once it gets through them, it's a joint decision-making process. And they have, the creative director or the project director has their lenses that they're looking at a decision through, and then producers have the lenses that they're looking through. So sometimes you do have to make a decision based on budget, and sometimes you have to make a decision based on art style. And each decision is totally different depending on what phase of the project you're in, if it's client or internal. There are so many different factors that determine who kind of has the last say, even though it is a joint decision. So the short answer is it depends, but usually we're among the last to kind of help make that decision made.
Cool. Now, Danny, Laura, you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think part of it, while ultimately, if someone needs to rubber stamp yes or no, you're probably going to be part of that chain. Generally, the best decisions are made as part of a team. I think especially with some of the work that we do at Schell, because in the production role, you need to learn a little bit about everything. You're going to make the best decision by getting that input from that art director or from that engineering director. And so while it's like, am I the final decision maker on this? Like, probably not. You're probably the person that's just going to go to the other team members, hear what everybody's thinking, and then using your best judgment. So it's not so much your judgment call as using your judgment skills to weigh all of the factors in a decision, rather than it's less hierarchical than it sounds.
Yeah, echoing what Laura said, I'd say you're more of like a facilitator of the decision making, right? Like, yeah, like for instance, right now, like I'm working on like naming a project, and so it's like you get all of the like teams input, and then you get all of the directors input, and then you get all of marketing and all the VPs feedback, and then you talk to the client as well, and then you like all like you're trying to like facilitate this discussion that's going in all sorts of different directions, and be like, okay, well, like here's the thing that like here's where the Venn diagram overlaps in the middle, and this is what we're going with.
Good stuff. Yeah, great answers. Let's see. Yeah, so along those lines, the gold winged angel. That's that's a great name. What are some of the best qualities of a producer? And all of you are touching on, that Danny talked about great facilitator. Laura, you kind of talked about just making sure you have the engine going. Connor, you kind of talked about knowing a little bit of everything. So kind of just putting that in a nice package for the gold winged angel. What are your thoughts about the best qualities? And anybody can start. Danny, you're unmuted, so we'll go with you.
Oh no. I just say the biggest thing for me lately has been communication. Like communication is huge, especially because like it all comes back to the thing, right? Like everyone's working on their own stuff and they're not necessarily talking to each other, especially in work from home age. It's like so much stuff gets lost in DMs or people are just like, well, I just thought you knew this. I just thought that you would assume that's what I'm doing, sort of thing. So being that real like just central hub of communication, just broadcasting out everything, even if it's just stuff on the horizon, things like, oh, I know that people might be worried about this thing that's coming down the road, and being like, hey, it's okay, we've got a plan in place, here's what we're going to do, here's how it's going to fit into the schedule. Just like you've almost got to try and be a little bit of a mind reader. And then just assume that everyone knows nothing. Like even if it winds up you just sound like a broken record, or you just like you're telling someone the same thing twice, it's better they have that information than not. And yeah, that's definitely the biggest thing I've been learning lately.
I would absolutely second what she just said. I think just being like you see the pictures of like the old school telephone. What were they called? Like telephone operators, where they were just had a big switchboard and they're connecting this person to that person to that person, making sure that everybody has the information that they need to do the best job that they can. And also to do that, communication is huge. Approachability is huge too, because and being proactive in items too. What could be a problem might not be a problem. Knowing when to alert everybody and when you might be over communicating. It's having good judgment and making sure that you are building the relationships on the team so that people feel comfortable who might be even closer to a potential problem or potential cost savings with time or effort or anything like that. Knowing when people can come to you, having those relationships that they are willing to come to you, working together as a team. And that takes just like a lot of different factors, but communication is certainly a central tenet to that.
Yeah, and the only thing to add to that, because that's obvious, that's number one, I think, in my book as well. And then organizational ability is probably kind of dovetails with that. That just, even if yes, you're communicating everything, but also there are times when you can't be there to communicate. And then hopefully you've set up your Google Drive or your project in general so that people know where to go to get information they need, because you're not always going to be there, especially in the work from home age. You're not always over their shoulder and they can't just turn and ask you every question they have. So kind of building your project and your team in a way that's like, oh, I know who I can go ask, or I know where I can go look for this thing. I mean, that's kind of an empowerment thing as well, that you try and give your team as many tools as they can that are organized in kind of a logical way to help them succeed without being the bottleneck that's like, oh man, I really need Connor to show me where this document is, even though it's like, nope, if you just think about it's like, spell it how it sounds. It's like, if you think it's in this folder, it is probably in that folder. So stuff like that.
Good stuff. Yeah. Oh, sorry, my daughter just came home. Yeah. I'm on a call. Okay. So, so, the work from home age, right? Yeah. So, some other things. other questions. So whenever you're working on a team, you're trying to get that team dynamic going. Game Dev One asks, how do you handle conflict as a team? Um, because conflict happens. So we've talked just a little bit about that, creative tension with just the producer and project director alone. But whenever it comes to multiple directors, whenever it comes to having a large team and people, Schell Games is interesting that a lot of people can put in their creative input. So how do you manage expectations? Kind of talked about scope. How do you manage just making sure that people's feelings don't get hurt if it doesn't quite fit into what the creative vision is? That's a really big question, so you guys can take little snippets of it as you deem fit.
Sure. I think one other important factor to that too is somewhere like Schell, where we're making games which are super cool and super fun. People are very impassioned they can be very impassioned about what they believe should be part of a game. And so it's wonderful to work with a group of folks that really care about what they're doing. With that said, yeah, you're right. You do end up with conflict from time to time. I think ultimately to be an arbiter of what is best for the game. You want to champion what is going to ultimately be best for the game. And when I say best for the game, I don't mean just content wise. I mean you could build the best game ever. If it doesn't ship, it's not the best game ever because no one will ever play it. So you definitely need to make sure that best includes everything. And how do you weigh that, especially when you're contemplating some things that are a little more nebulous from time to time, like what would look better. So one philosophy that we talk a lot about is disagree and commit. And so sometimes if you have people on the opposite ends of a spectrum in an argument, or not an argument, but creative decision that needs to be made, and one person feels strongly over here that it should go one way and one person is over here, it's great to just bring the people together. And this is where communication is key. This is where the existing relationships are key. And hearing each person out and talking about it as a group, oftentimes that's huge, and that can be really difficult. It's easier said than done. But hearing why someone thinks one route is better and why another person thinks another route is better, and having all the key stakeholders in a decision to be made able to voice their opinions, and making sure that they can voice their opinions and that they're heard. So that's where it comes into personality types. Maybe someone's a little more soft spoken, but they have a really good reason for why something should happen a certain way. So hearing everybody out, knowing where everybody stands, and then again being that switchboard to help everybody communicate a little more effectively. That can be really important because in order to work as a team, you need to function as a team. And so you've got a lot of people coming into a decision from different angles, who have different perspectives and different opinions and different life experiences to help advise what might be the best. So it really takes patience. It can take, sometimes that means letting somebody rant before a meeting and talking to them to hear their side of it, really understand where each person lies. It can be easy to go with the decision of the person that you're friends with in the room, or the person who is the loudest and makes an exuberant point about something. But really hearing everything and understanding as a group where everyone stands, and then making the decision that weighs all of the costs and benefits as best as possible. You're never going to please everybody. And if you go into it trying to make sure everybody's happy at the end of the day, that might not always work, but they can be happy for other reasons, because they've been heard, because maybe they're getting a win somewhere else on the project, or just knowing that we respect your opinion, we appreciate your opinion, and in this case, this other person might be right. And just, again, communication and making sure that people feel included and are heard, that's paramount.
Good stuff. I think that's good there. Let's see. Uh, Oh, here's a good one. Devon Reynolds asks, yeah, I'm just going to answer a lot of these questions. We have some really, really good questions. So I know I always send notes to the team and like, here's what I would like to talk about. But sometimes we get a lot of really good questions in the live chat. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to ditch that and just go with these. So, but they're all along the lines that we were looking to talk about anyway. But Devon Reynolds asks, what is it like to interact with stakeholders or people who are not directly a part of the development team? And that's a great question because with our producers, you guys work with, not just, clients, but even whenever we're working with, educational games that might be considered our own IP, we do have some, external stakeholders with the subject matter experts, professors, scientists, things like that, we have to bring in those opinions to figure out, oh man, how are we going to put that into a game? So yeah, that's a great question. So what is it like to interact? What type of processes do you guys have in mind with that? And let's see, uh, Danny, how about you start us off with that?
Yeah, I'm not sure how much I have to say about this. I guess at least in my specific case recently, it's we've been interacting with a client who's very experienced with the technology and everything. So they get where we're coming from on a lot of things, but especially in terms of, I guess, it can be hard to balance opinions when it comes to like people who are so some clients are like they're not experienced with whatever the project you're working on, or they're maybe not avid gamers. There's some clients who are very avid gamers, and then just kind of like trying to balance feedback that's coming in from those two sides, trying to get an even opinion of like what's too hard, what's too easy, things like that. I don't know. I'm probably not the best person to ask, to be fair, because I probably work the closest with a client who's like very, very immersed in kind of what we're doing.
Cool. So I know, I mean, just with working with Laura for a couple of years, I know, we've had some experiences of going, back and forth with different clients and stakeholders. So, Laura, if you want to take that one, you're happy to.
Yeah, absolutely. So it really comes back to, again, communication, making sure that so when you're dealing with someone outside of the team, it really depends on, first off, who are they and what is their role and what is their stake in the project? Is it a client? So at Schell, oftentimes the producer is the first point of contact on the team itself. So sometimes if we're working with an external organization, they might not have a direct person that you are talking to. So you might talk to a variety of people within their organization, knowing what those roles are and what those people need exactly from the team to be most respectful of their time, as well. Because oftentimes, if we're working with the client, their team might have more than just the project that Schell is working on their plate. So making sure that you can be direct with them, to be courteous, to be kind, to build that trust as well. So if you can communicate as much as possible, let them know where things stand in development, what you need from them, what they need from you. And sometimes, down the road, okay, well, if we can't quite deliver it at this date, does this other date work? Or if we need, say, for example, a piece of artwork from a client, like what are the dependencies on that artwork, and just overly communicating everything so that no one's blindsided by anything. You never want to walk into work and then be surprised. So, and as Danny mentioned, some of our projects are internal. So those internal IP projects, we generally go to our vice president's group, and we treat them almost like a client. So it puts them in a kind of an interesting way, because ultimately they are advocating for the end product because it's the studio's end product. So how do we overly communicate where things are, knowing that they're also championing for us to deliver the best project that it can be. And that's really what it comes down to at the end of the day. Not seeing people necessarily, you want to know their role, but you also don't want to see it as an us and them type of situation. You don't want to look at a client and say, well, on their side of the fence, they're going to do that. We're going to do this internally. Everyone working on a project is ultimately a team. Everyone is working together to achieve a goal. So it comes back to, okay, well, what is my role in that? I want to make sure that this comes in on time, on budget, with a happy team. And if everybody on the team is happy, that means making sure people have the information that they need, making sure that you're proactive about solving problems. making sure that you bring some levity sometimes to the conversation, that you make work as fun as it possibly can be. And so that can take a ton of different forms depending on the team. What are the team's preferences? And when I say the team, I don't just mean your development team. I've worked with clients who are a little more formal. I've worked with clients who they look forward to the rapport talk before the report talk, and they love to know a little bit more about you, and knowing exactly what each person, what do they call that? It's the platinum role, treating people the way that they want to be treated. So relationship building, making sure that everything on the project is going well. And ultimately, if everyone's doing a good job and getting along at the end of the day, the producer has done a great job. If you're a fan of the show Futurama, there's an episode where they say, if you've done your job right, no one knows you've done anything at all. And so it's like, I've always thought that that's such a good piece of wisdom. A lot of times, I think one of the best things you can do as a producer is to not be chasing any type of glory or a title or a credit or anything, and just to say, like, is everything going well? Is this project going well? Okay, then things are in a good spot. I've done what I need to do.
See, that's funny you mentioned that role, because similar to the Connor, I have a big sports background, myself, and I've always attributed that with a referee, for soccer games. Like, because I've done all types of different, refereeing and things like that. And it's like, okay, well, the rule is, if the game happens and nobody even remembers that you were a ref during that game or during that match, it's like, that was a good game, right? So it's very similar to that. Cool. Let's see. So speaking of levity, we have some fun questions here. We'll start with one that's like actually pertinent to the conversation, and then one not so much. So Daniel Ritchie asks, are there any specific "I'm proud of this work" moments that you can share? And anybody can start us off.
I'll start with mine because it's going to be the least glamorous, because I actually can't talk about it too much. Working with a location-based entertainment client has been, it's challenging at times. This project has gone on for quite a long time, but there are a number of times when you see a lot of things in little chunks, and then once you see all of it put together, once in a while you kind of just watch the live stream of something happening and you're like, oh wait, we just did that. That's pretty cool. Like, that's cool. And you have those moments every once in a while. And at one point, I would love to share what those are, because they are really cool. But I can say, yes, I've had them.
Likewise, I'll share what Connor said. Sometimes that, you do something really cool and you're like, oh man, that was so neato. And when it's still in production, you can't always share that. But I will say, on one of the location-based experiences that I worked on, it was at an actual location, like a place people go pay money to enjoy recreationally, and to watch somebody using the experience. So like, they don't know who I'm in a Schell Games shirt right now, but like, we don't walk around with like a big name tag that says like Schell Games producer. So you're just like kind of walking around and you see somebody using the experience that was in production for years, and you contributed to quite a bit. It's incredibly rewarding, because you're like, oh my gosh, like we all made that together, and they don't know, there's no credits in it, but like, to see that enhancing somebody's day and them learning from that, that's really cool to know that your work is just enriching someone else's life.
Yeah, and I think that both Connor and Laura nailed everything basically. But to add to that is there's also kind of like the internal side of things. So like, when your team's really happy as well. So like, when your coworkers turn to you and they're like, dude, I'm really proud of what I got to work on in this project. This like really, it vibes with me. It's what I've always wanted to work on. Or they're just like, this team's so easy to work with. I can't believe the progress we're making. It just means that you're obviously doing your job right, because they're able to do that and they're able to feel that way and feel like they're excited to come to work because of the structure of the team or how things are going. And that's always like very rewarding. But yeah, obviously the end product is always like the most amazing part. But
yeah, I think along the way we do things like team playthroughs, and we'll often play a build of something that we're creating, or we'll do play tests with people. And especially when you see someone who either hasn't played the game in a while, or someone who is coming in as a naive play tester, try out your experience and they walk away and they're like, that was awesome. That's such a good feeling. You're like, okay, wow. Because you could get stuck in the weeds. But you know, to really see it more, you pull back and you see it at a high level. It's super cool.
Yeah, one thing that I love to do, and just to tell the teams whenever we go to events and conferences and showcasing the experiences, and like I would just love to just if I could just visually like provide a report to these teams. Like you have no idea how awesome people enjoy these games, So that's something that I as part of the marketing team want to continue to the show to because sometimes just like you guys have experience that you work on a game, ship it, and then you're on to the next game, you don't get a chance to marketing gets a chance to show like these games are awesome, look how awesome they are, and get to see how people's eyes just light up whenever they see some experiences. So we got to get you guys out to more events. That's basically what I'm saying. Let's see. Matthew says, thank you for the question, Matthew. What's the biggest lesson you learned about how to be a good producer between when you started producing and now? And I'll call on somebody. If
I'll jump in. I'm so uncomfortable with silence. I think one of the things that I've learned is to ask questions. So, people kind of going back to what I had said earlier, there's I think this fallacy and especially it's pervasive in our entire society that it's like, no, you need to exhibit mastery, you need to exhibit confidence, and granted, you can and should exhibit confidence when and where appropriate, but I think sometimes people look at asking questions as like a sign that you're a noob, you don't know what you're talking about, like I shouldn't be here, anything like that. And honestly, the people we work with at Schell, they're doing high level nuanced kind of stuff and they're experts at it, and people generally enjoy talking about things they know a lot about. So having that humility to ask questions, admit when you're not entirely sure about something, because ultimately if your responsibility is to make sure that a project is coming in where it needs to, talking to people is a huge part of that, to learn exactly where parts of development are. So one of the biggest things that I learned, when I started at Schell, it was, I'm like, it's an honor to be here. This is so cool what we're doing. I don't want to bother anybody. And so I'll just go into Jira and I'll make my charts and I'll try to track things based on time estimates. And that only gets you so far. And realizing that people are looking to you sometimes for leadership as well. So in order to provide said leadership in a way that you can confidently rely on and people can rely on your work, you need to make sure that you understand that. And so it is your job to oftentimes understand that kind of stuff. Another thing that I heard at a conference pretty early on in my time at Schell, and it was this kind of like, you hear something that can be obvious, but then it's like this huge aha moment. A lot of times working your way to becoming a producer, you along the way end up being a sole contributor. So you're one of the people that might be doing level design, you might be designing work, you might be contributing a thing to a game and checking something in. And then when you get to the producer level, you're kind of more just like managing the project and you're watching that things are getting in, and you're like creating reports for people and stuff. But all of a sudden, when you're not doing that, those sole contributor tasks, sometimes it can be really alarming. You're like, oh my gosh, I've been busy all day and I don't know what I really have to show for it because I've just been talking to people. Like, am I pulling my weight? And all of a sudden you get in this like crazy zone of like imposter syndrome. You're like, everyone else has checked like all this stuff into the game. Like, what have I done today? But then you realize like, hold on, I'm the grease in the wheels. I'm not necessarily a wheel right now, but I'm making sure that things are happening and I'm making sure that they're happening effectively and that I'm making sure that they're happening appropriately. And sometimes, again, if nothing goes wrong, have you done anything? Of course you have, because you've been double checking and making sure that everyone is on the right track before there's a problem. So I would say those were two of the biggest things that that I learned coming into production. Just making sure that it's okay to ask questions. It's okay to not know, and then go digging for the answer. And also, sometimes it's a little less concrete and it's a little less like, here's the thing that I did today, but it's still an essential part of the process.
I would say the big thing that I kind of continually learn is like the scheme, like kind of touching on, Laura talked about things being concrete, and it's like our job it's not concrete at all. Things shift day to day, week to week, project to project, that like the culture that you build has way more to do with how the project does than the scheme that you try to use when you build it. It's like the actual, whether you use Agile or Jira or whatever like design, whatever methodology you use as a producer or a project manager or whatever, like that. When I first got here, I was like, oh man, I'm going to be really good at like, we're going to do it this exact way, and we're going to do the Kanban board a certain way, and X, Y, and Z. And you realize like, oh, all that overhead does not fit this team and fit the way the project's working. And you start to realize like, oh, that you pick and choose the stuff of the methodologies and the schemes that you like based on what's going on in the team. So it's more about building the culture of using things that make sense to people, and not just like forcing your ideology or your methodology on people. So and every day it could change. It's something that makes sense in the first 6 weeks of the project. Something big you could change hardware, you could change clients, you could change whatever. And it's like, oh, well, scrap that old thing that we were doing, like scrap the weekly check-ins. We're going to do this every day now, or you have to be ready to flow differently. And having a team culture that is accepting to that and is okay to move around as things need to, that's way more important than like, oh no, we have to do this one way because we've been doing it this way.
Yeah, I've been having those discussions with my team lately too, where like it's not about like trying to avoid every bump in the road, because inevitably you're always going to hit one. It's about how you actually manage the situation when you get there, right? And like setting up your processes and setting up your team in a way where it's like, it's not a big deal if you hit a bump in the road, and you know exactly how to mitigate that and exactly how to handle it. Ideally, you're not gonna hit it at all, but when you do, you know exactly how you're gonna get through it.
Good stuff. Oh man, we've been doing questions and we're almost running out of time. So let's see, what else can we do? Let's see. Taboo Coco asks, how is I Expect You to Die 2 looking? I'll take that. It's looking pretty good. I can't wait for you guys to play later this year. It's going to be awesome. Let's see. Fear asks, let's see, what would Until You Fall or I Expect You to Die look like if they hadn't ended up in VR? So what mechanics would change, what we've done differently. So Fear, Until You Fall and I Expect You to Die were meant to be virtual reality experiences. The only difference is that whenever I Expect You to Die, the first one, was launched in 2016, we still didn't know exactly what the controllers would look like. So that's why the mouse and keyboard was introduced with the VR headset. But they were both meant to be VR only experiences. So if they didn't end up in VR, they would probably be very different experiences. So that's a very interesting question. But they were meant to be VR only experiences. That was the goal for those two. All right. Let's see. So yeah, last one, I guess. So Jeff Bob asks, well, last one before all of our announcements and all that good stuff. Jeff Bob asks, if you could pick one game you as a producer have helped make, and you want to go back and change one aspect, big or small, what would it be? And so this could not just with I'll open it up, not just the Schell Games experience, but any experience that you have touched on. But if you want to talk about a Schell Games experience that you're able to talk about, you could do that as well. I'll call on someone.
Before you call on me, Dwayne, I'll just go. In grad school, I worked on a VR experience called Pegasus. You were on a motion-based chair that moved around. And you were flying on Pegasus through ancient Greece while you were in the headset. And so you would lean around in order to fly around Greece, and you would go through all these different rings and get points and all that kind of stuff. And I don't know what if I could go back and have 6 more weeks or 4 more weeks with that project and the team that we had, who's actually a number of current Schell Games employees. I think knowing what we've kind of been through in the industry in the last year since we made that project, I think we would make some big changes, and we'd add so much stuff in any kind of time frame that, like, if I had the chance to go back and work on that, that would be awesome.
This is a tricky question because initially I was like, man, this is really spicy because I don't want to be going and like talking about some game that I really love and then like just being like, well, you should have done it this way. But I did think of a good one because I was a big fan of Glitch back in the day. If anyone played it, it was like a web browser game, and I wish that it was kind of more like a going back in time to save them kind of thing. Like I wish I could have gone back and just been like, don't make this in a browser game. Don't do it. It's on the way out. Like you need to put this on another platform so it can live and so that it's not just so it doesn't go away. I mean that game wound up being Slack. Like that was the foundations of Slack, but that's what they pivoted to. So something good came out of it. There was a silver lining. But I do wish we still had that game with us today as well.
A really tough question. So I worked on a prototype of it's an original Schell Games. I'm trying to think of the release title for it. I remember the code name for the project, History Maker VR. So it's a tool that basically it's meant to be a tool that's used within a classroom where you can go into VR and embody a historical figure and give a speech as that character. And I think it would have been really cool. And this is a very non-producer answer, but to just like totally blow up the scope of that, if just kind of like what Connor said, if we had a little more time to expand that and to create some different environments. It was something that being on the prototype team, we created the prototype and then the full production happened later. So it was some of the folks on the team were the same, but very different. But I remember being on a prototype team for something like that. We had so many really cool ideas, and ultimately the producers on that team made it work because you're in a theater and it makes the most sense and it was the right decision. But you could change anything, and we're in a fantasy world of that. We had an idea of doing like a theater in the round and all these other cool experiences. It would have been really neat to put some of the characters into some different settings. That would have been really fun.
Cool. So, Danny, Laura, Connor, thank you guys so much. We were able to fill this entire hour with mostly questions, so that was fantastic, guys. In the YouTube chat, Discord, thank you so much. But stay tuned. We have some announcements. Okay, so if you want to meet some of our lovely developers on May 13th, we are having our open house, a virtual open house. Make sure, I believe our live chat moderator, Jill, is putting the link in the live chat, so make sure that you can go to the Remake Learning Days link to RSVP. And so once you RSVP and all that good stuff, you'll get the link to what our open house is going to be. We'll have different rooms that you're able to talk to our developers, our senior leadership team, and people who are working on some of our original games. You might even get a chance to see a little bit of some of the games that we're working on. So, foreshadowing there. So get excited. Also today, well, like I said, was Happy Superhero Day, but we also released our Hero Bundle. So we released a bundle with I Expect You Die and Until You Fall. So with the bundle together, it's 20% off of each game. So make sure you check that on Steam, and I believe that that link is going to be put in the chat as well. Another thing, this Friday, if you are interested in trying to see some high performance competition with Until You Fall, our virtual reality, hack and slash roguelite sword fighting game. The tournament that's going on right now in our Discord, the finals are going to be broadcasted in a live watch party this Friday at 5 p.m. The Hero of Rokar tournament at 5 p.m. Eastern in the Until You Fall Discord. So join the Discord. Watch those 4 videos of the finalists doing some wild things. Our community marketing specialist, Adam, is working hard at making sure those videos are awesome, and the commentary is going to be great. Wishlist I Expect You to Die 2 on Steam, so that the Steam store page is open. Wishlist, let us know how much you're excited for it. And the May edition of Dinner with the Devs will be May 26th, 6 p.m. And it'll be the marketing team. All 6 of us on the marketing team will be on. It'll be my people. It's going to be great. I got all types of stuff waiting for our marketing, my team members. So thank you again, Danny, Connor, Laura. You guys were fantastic. Mac, our tech producer, thank you. Jill, our live chat moderator, thank you. Allie, our post-production coordinator, thank you. And everybody, thank you especially for watching the stream. We will see you next month. Bye-bye.